Welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone had the productive working sessions. And just a reminder, for those of you who might be running low on some batteries in your mobile devices, we do have an awesome recharging station, courtesy of Comcast NBC Universal up there. There's all sorts of chairs and pillows and couches you can sit on, have a meeting, and also recharge your phones. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Jack Bailey. Jack's the president of U.S. Pharmaceuticals for GSK. In this role, he helps GSK fulfill its mission to help people do more, feel better, and live longer. Jack has a successful track record of leading organizations through change, delivering strong business performance, and maintaining a focus on patient access and affordability. GSK is known for how it invests in research to combat diseases in the developing world, increases access to medicines, builds capacity, and delivers sustainable growth in the least developed countries in the world. These are some of the reasons why GSK last year won the Corporate Citizenship Award for Best Corporate Steward for a Large Business. Please join me in welcome Jack Bailey.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate it. And thank you to the Chamber for the recognition last year in our work as corporate stewardship. And it's certainly a real honor to be here with all of you. It sounds like it's been a great conference so far. As a science-led healthcare company, corporate citizenship speaks right to our mission. We create medicines, vaccines, and consumer healthcare products that help people do more, feel better, and live longer, as our mission statement goes. And whether it's 50 years of discovering and developing products for asthma and COPD, bringing the latest shingles vaccine to U.S. adults here in the country that will make a significant impact on those of us 50 and older, we have long considered it a duty to ensure as many people as possible have access to the innovation that comes out of our research labs so that they can improve their health. Now, I don't have to tell any of you that healthcare is in the midst of enormous fundamental change, not to mention incredible pressure. And like many industries that are facing disruption, we have to ask ourselves certain questions. How do we prepare? How do we need to adapt to ensure that we can continue to fulfill our mission? Really, it's about how do we future-proof the company and its employees. As I look back over the history of our company, I see one quality that stands out that has helped guide us through almost 3 centuries of existence. And while it's a simple word to say, it is enormously complex to put in practice. And that quality is the quality of courage. The courage to take new approaches, the courage to embrace global markets, the courage to invest in people who are making a difference now and in the future, and also the courage to change. As I look around this room, I don't think I see a single leader who signals to me that they are immune to the change that is buffeting your respective industry. In the pharmaceutical industry, we have faced scrutiny over our sales processes, questions over the costs of medicines, and we're just now beginning to hear of a major online player, Amazon, who is wondering and thinking about coming into our industry, which could fundamentally change how people get our product. As always, we'll need to be thoughtful and carefully plan to forge ahead. But as we prepare to face these new challenges, courage, that single most important requirement for resilience and for future-proofing, remains essential. Now, you could say that I was raised in a house that had many examples of courage. My father was a U.S. Air Force pilot, and my mother, she was an intensive care nurse. And I can remember she used to work the 3 to 11 shift at Delavan Hospital in Lakeland Hospital in Delavan, Wisconsin. And when I would pick her up at 11 at night and we would drive home, she would talk about the patients that she cared for and the challenges in the healthcare system that made that difficult. I recall her sharing with me those challenges, but never lacking the commitment. To me, she was a role model in my life for commitment to patients. As my journey went on, I went to college, went to business school, and some years later joined a major multinational pharmaceutical firm who, when I was with, took my travels to South Africa. And I can say it was an eye-opening experience to arrive there in 1998 with my wife, Robin, pregnant with our first child, Emily, just 6 weeks pregnant at the time. To say that it was overwhelming is an understatement. We moved there so I could serve as country manager and later be regional head of the African continent for this multinational pharmaceutical firm. But more importantly, at that time, 1998, was the height of the HIV/AIDS crisis. By the end of that year, the United Nations would estimate that more than 33 million people worldwide would be living with HIV/AIDS. And that year alone, 6 million people had new infections. There were 2.5 million deaths. In Africa alone, that equated to 5,500 funerals each and every day. I can still remember the very first day when Robin and I landed in Johannesburg. We were taking a cab downtown to the hotel we were staying at. And at the first light, right there on Santon Drive, children came up to the taxi cab window. Nobody older than 12 years old, frequently taking care of younger brothers and sisters. They were in tattered clothes, begging for coins. They were the AIDS orphans, something I had only read about in Time magazine back in the States. And now, here they were, right in front of me. On the policy front, in dealing with the AIDS crisis, there were clearly disagreements at a fundamental level, even about what caused AIDS at that time. Governments in the pharmaceutical industry were struggling how to agree on the best way forward, how to work together to provide a coherent response to this devastating disease. AIDS denialism, stigmatism, discrimination, and a lack of understanding around the healthcare system all added to this problem. Clearly, mistakes were made, not the least of which by the pharmaceutical industry, which fundamentally failed to understand the scale of this problem fast enough. All of this led to some very bad decisions. But I'm proud to say by the middle of 2001, the company I now work for, GSK, was working to turn this around. To do it, we had to be courageous. We had to remember our core purpose. To start with, the company introduced not-for-profit pricing for one of the core treatments for HIV, antiretrovirals. This was applied to all of sub-Saharan Africa so that people could access the medicines. We also initiated a voluntary licensing program for those same products. And today, through ViiV Healthcare, which is our global specialty company focused in on HIV, where we're the majority owner in partnership with Pfizer and Shionogi, we now have 11 royalty-free licenses in place. In fact, GSK actually no longer files or enforces any patents in the world's poorest countries. But we haven't just focused on existing medicines, we've also taken a long-term view. Here in the US, we've embarked upon a unique public-private venture with the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill called Cura Therapeutics. This is a company dedicated to finding a cure for HIV/AIDS, which means in my lifetime, we will go from 5,500 funerals a day to hopefully discovering a cure. This isn't just the case of GSK committing to a disease. It is the courage to innovate, the courage to put patients first that is core to our company. And it's how we contribute to building a sustainable global healthcare system. Now, we've also had the courage to change the way we do business. It's probably not a surprise that the pharmaceutical industry has been traditionally low in rankings of sectors that people trust. Recognizing this, GSK has made bold moves to help build more trusted relationships with our partners, with our customers, and ultimately with patients. Today, GSK is leading our industry in transparency with our commitment to disclose and share information about clinical studies to help advance science and improve patient care. Our online clinical study register was the first of its kind. It now has summaries for all 6,000 of our clinical trials that we've performed, and it receives nearly 11,000 visitors per month. And earlier this year, we ranked #1 in the entire industry out of 42 pharmaceutical firms for transparency. GSK was also the first company to stop a standard industry practice, which is to incentivize our sales professionals on the number of prescriptions written for any given medicine by the doctors in whom they call on. We now base bonuses on the quality of the interactions with the healthcare provider and a broader measure of our business performance. Our colleagues have actually seen this as a way to give them greater access into the providers, and our business has been able to grow because of that. And there's no doubt when you think about the pharmaceutical industry, the issue that seems to dominate the headlines these days is the cost of medicines. At GSK, we have demonstrated our commitment to responsible pricing through our actions and our track record. For instance, from 2013 to 2015, we launched 6 new medicines, all at or below the prevailing price of the category leader. In addition, over the last 5 years, our net price has increased 1%, well below healthcare inflation. But we understand we need to do more. We recognize there's continued frustration around the costs that consumers are paying for their healthcare, including medicines. Long-term solutions need a collaborative and courageous approach from many stakeholders, and GSK wants to take an active part in that. As a company that has been in business for over 300 years, we know we must also have the courage to look to the future. The science we do has never been stronger. My roots originally were in genetics and in the science, and I can assure you, we know more about how the human body works than ever before. We've mapped the human genome. We understand how many more targets there are that we can focus our medicine creation on. Since 2000, over 550 new medicines and vaccines have been created that help millions of patients. Even more exciting, in today's pharmaceutical pipelines, over 7,000 products are being developed around the world. And GSK makes up a significant portion of those in areas like HIV, respiratory, oncology, and immunoinflammation. In addition to addressing the healthcare challenges of today, we are also committed to helping aspiring scientists of tomorrow. We're fostering a lifelong love of science, technology, engineering, and math in our youth. Our free Science in the Summer program that was started over 30 years ago and is focused on communities in and around Raleigh and Philadelphia. Several years ago, we expanded this nationally to now reach 34,000 children from here in Washington, D.C., all the way out to Washington State. Students from the inner city of Los Angeles to Bangor, Maine, learn more about things like the science of sports. For older students, we've started a new apprenticeship program where we provide on-the-job training and development to high school graduates. We pay for academic coursework for them to pursue for engineers and science manufacturing technicians of the future. And at the end of the program, they receive an industry-issued, portable, nationally recognized accreditation. At GSK, we like to think that we've been future-proofing for over 300 years, that we are working to ensure we're prepared for the next 300 years. Ultimately, it's about the courage to look both within and beyond ourselves, that knowing what we do impacts the world of today and the future. It's about creating resilient business models in global markets, changing the way we operate, nurturing our workforce, nurturing the future workforce, and ultimately living our values. We don't always have all the right answers, but as we prepare for what's coming over the horizon, at GSK, we confidently future-proof by asking essential questions. What does this mean for our patients? How can we best serve those who need us most? We will continue to answer those questions with courage, the courage that keeps in view the mission of this company that has brought us to where we are today, and that is to help patients do more, feel better, and live longer. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack, for sharing your insights with us today and for GSK being such a value-driven company. Next, we're honored to be joined by Dr. Jerome Adams, Surgeon General of the United States. Dr. Adams will discuss the course he's charting as Surgeon General to create public-private partnerships with a specific focus on mental health and the opioid epidemic. These two issues were central to his work as the Commissioner of Health for the state of Indiana under then Governor, now Vice President Mike Pence. Dr. Adams spoke at our Health Means Business Summit this past February that we hosted, and we're so glad he could join us for a discussion on his most current work. Please join me in welcoming the Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. Jerome Adams. Welcome, Dr. Adams, and welcome back.
Well, thank you
chamber.
so much. It's good to be here amongst friends again.
Well, we're so thrilled to have you, and I think a lot of people understand, or at least heard of the Surgeon General, but could you explain what does the Surgeon General do, and who does he do it with? Does he have a team, and if so, how big is it?
Well, one of the important things to know about the Surgeon General is I don't have nearly the budget or the power that people think that I do. The other important thing to know is that I'm not the Attorney General. I don't want to be the Attorney General. He's getting grilled on Capitol Hill right now, in case you all haven't checked your Twitter. My daughter, I went to her school, and they had a big sign that said, "Welcome, Sergeant General." And also, the Surgeon General is neither a surgeon nor a general. I'm actually a Vice Admiral. We use Navy rankings. But the reason why I get to wear this uniform is I'm the head of the United States Public Health Service, which is one of the branches of the uniformed services, 6,500 of the best and most devoted people to health and public health in the nation: doctors, nurses, pharmacists, environmental health specialists, engineers. And we've been responding nonstop since I took office September 5th. 3 Category 5 hurricanes in a row. We've deployed over 1,000 people there. The wildfires in California, the shootings that happened in Vegas and in Texas, and also the unfortunate events in New York. So we've been quite busy, but I'm certainly blessed and honored to be in this role and to have an opportunity to share my perspective in regards to discussions about health.
Well, we've heard a lot about the economic benefits of health, and that's been a real focus of yours. Could you explain what that means?
Well, the overall mantra for my tenure is going to be better health through better partnerships. What did Einstein say the definition of insanity was? It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Too often we stay in our silos and we speak to each other in languages that only resonate with the people who are already converted. I want to challenge folks to speak to people who aren't in their traditional sphere of influence. In Indiana, when I was health commissioner there, we had the largest HIV outbreak related to injection drug use in the history of the United States. Small town, 4,000 people, had 3 total HIV cases in its entire history. Now they're up to 230 cases of HIV in just over 2 years, all related to injection drug use. I'm a doctor, I'm a public health professional. Who do you think I called to solve that outbreak? Well, it wasn't other doctors or health professionals. I had to call the sheriff. I had to call the head of the local chamber of commerce. I had to call the local pastor. Those were the folks who I needed to bring in to change the policies that were necessary in order to implement a syringe service program in that community and ultimately stop the outbreak. But in regards to health and the economy, I think that we really need to do a better job from a health point of view of speaking in an economic language. And for the folks in the audience, you need to do a better job of understanding how health and being able to articulate how health impacts your bottom line. When I speak to folks who are from a business crowd, I tell them, I don't want anything from you. I actually can help you. I can help you move your bottom line. We know that communities that are healthier are more prosperous, and there's plenty of examples of that. And we know that in turn, communities that are more prosperous are more healthful. The top 10% of counties in the country have higher high school graduation rates, higher college attendance rates, lower obesity rates than the lowest 10% of counties. So who do you want working for you? Do you want the folks who you're employing to be obese, to be high school dropouts, to be smokers, or do you want them to be folks who are healthy? And I'll put it in terms that resonate even more. Who do you think is going to be absent from work more? Who do you think is going to be less productive when they're at work? Yeah. Who do you think is going to have more workplace accidents? It's going to be the people who are unhealthy. So my challenge to folks is to understand the connections between health and the economy, and furthermore, to do something about it. That's why one of the things I want to do is put together a report on health and the economy, and I hope some of you all in this audience can help me compiling the evidence that shows a link between health and the economy, but then showing you what you can do to improve it. Target is a great example of a corporation that has invested in their community because they see it has an impact on their bottom line. GSK, and you just heard from the CEO, has done a great job of investing in the Asheville community and building up the community because it was the right thing to do, yes, but also because they knew it was going to impact their bottom line.
All right. Now, well, the past couple of years, we had this partnership with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and we went around to 12 different cities, working with the mayors and the local chambers, really trying to figure, and we came to Indianapolis, and we're so appreciative of all the support that we got there. We really made the case that, and Robert Wood Johnson Foundation believes that 40% of a county's health really has to revolve around education, employment, and income. And to your point, those more wealthier counties, as they do the scores, they tend to have much higher graduation rates, and people even live longer. So we're all in on this, and there are a lot of companies in this room and a bunch of nonprofits. What can we do immediately to connect with your office to try to help you achieve what you're going for?
Well, I actually do have a couple of challenges for the folks in the audience. Share with our office your best examples of corporations that have invested in community health and seen a positive outcome, not on the health metrics, though I do care about that, but on their economic metrics. Have seen their absenteeism go down, have seen their workplace accidents go down, because the more we can share those examples, the better we will be able to recruit other people into our way of thinking. The other thing I would do, how many CFOs are here?
We're going to work on that.
That's what I thought. No, that's what I thought. And here's my challenge. I love you guys. Love you guys. You're the choir. You're the choir. I'm appreciative that so many companies are investing in corporate citizenship, but I don't want this to be an afterthought. I don't want it to be, well, we're going to focus on profit, and then if we have some money left over, we'll have a VP of corporate citizenship who can work on these issues, and then when the economy goes down, we're going to forget about it. I want you to engage your CFOs and find out from them. Ask them, what are our health expenses? And how can we get involved? Workplace wellness programs are fantastic. We need to do a better job of sharing best practices because there's enough out there for us to have evidence-based workplace wellness programs throughout our country. However, a person can be healthy and you can use your levers from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., but if from 4 p.m. to 8 a.m. the next day, you're sending them home to a community that doesn't have complete streets so they can't exercise, you're sending them home to an apartment complex where there's not smoke-free laws and they're exposed to tobacco smoke all day long, you're sending them home to a food desert and they can't eat healthy, it's undoing everything you did during the day. So you need to think beyond workplace wellness and think truly into community building and make that case to your CFOs and to your CEOs so that they understand this is not something we're doing just because it's the right thing to do. This is not something we're doing just because the Surgeon General says it's going to make us healthier. This is something we're doing because it's critical to our bottom line. That's how you change culture. And that's ultimately what I would challenge folks to do.
Well, I think you're spot on that. And that's really how you create these programs that are sustainable over a long period of time. And they succeed through different administrations as well as through different changes of leadership inside the company. So we hear you, and we want to get more of the business unit leaders here into our network because I think that many companies understand this. They just need to go out and do it.
Exactly. The other challenge I would leave your folks with is, again, to think about the non-traditional partners. My mantra, again, is better health through better partnerships. Great example with the Iowa Chamber of Commerce. Anyone here from Iowa?
We're going to work on that too.
No CFOs, no one here from Iowa. Oh, there we go. There we go. So in their Blue Zones initiative, the Chamber of Commerce brought together restaurants, businesses, schools, churches, all around the idea of creating a healthier environment because they felt it would be better for the economic bottom line. And they're having tremendous success. They've shown absenteeism rates decrease by 20%. They've shown that people in the town where this is taking place are living on average 3 years longer and have lost weight. And so there are positive examples of being able to make a difference, but you're not going to be able to do it alone. You're not going to be able to do it with a workplace wellness program alone. You're not going to be able to do it with a corporate citizenship program alone. You're only going to be able to do it by putting all these pieces together, including working with those non-traditional partners and increasing your touch points so that you can build a healthier community, which feeds into a healthier company and ultimately results in a healthier bottom line.
Absolutely. Now, we've got a few minutes left, and there's two other things that I wanted to bring up. One is in the news all the time, and one is not. The first is the opioid crisis, and your thoughts on that and what American business can do about it. And the second one is mental health issues, both in the workplace and in the community.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that. I'm actually speaking to the Senate Help Committee tomorrow about health and wellness in the economy, and one of the focuses is going to be on the opioid epidemic. Many of you probably heard Janet Yellen's remarks from earlier this summer when she was testifying before a congressional committee, and she said very explicitly that the opioid epidemic is hurting our nation's economic prosperity. So there is a link there. What can you do? Well, we know that if businesses recognize addiction as a chronic disease, as the chronic disease that it is, and not as a moral failing, and then ultimately help folks get treatment. So you can look at the way your benefit programs are structured and help folks get treatment. You'll actually have more committed, more productive employees, and you won't have to have that constant churn. You won't have those workplace accidents. You won't have to retrain people over and over again. There's lots of things that you can do. One of the things that was most shocking to me in Fort Wayne, Indiana, two things that I remember that just really stick with me. In Fort Wayne, Indiana, we were looking at the overdose deaths in that town, and over half of the overdose deaths that occurred in Fort Wayne were among people who were employed. So we tend to think of this occurring to folks who don't have a job. That means they're your employees who are out there. They're working for your companies, and they're utilizing opioids. So it's happening. The question is, what are we going to do about it? And we need to look at it in a comprehensive and evidence-based way that treats addiction as a chronic disease and not as a moral failing where we kick you out and say, you're done, because that doesn't help anyone. The other story that I heard was about a firm in Kentucky, and they started drug testing their clients, or their employees, and 40% tested positive. 40%. Now, I ask you, have you been randomly drug testing your folks? Do you have any idea what your rates are? I hope they're not 40%. We know Kentucky is right in the middle of the opioid belt, but I guarantee you they're higher than what you think. So whether or not you believe this is affecting you, it is. It's affecting your bottom line, and the only way that you're going to improve your bottom line is by tackling the opioid epidemic in partnership with health folks, with the law enforcement community, with the faith-based community.
All right. We're with you all the way on that one as well. And mental health, we've got a couple minutes left. Not many people talk about it, but it's there, and it's in the business, it's in the workplace, it's in the community. What can business do about that?
Well, mental health feeds directly into the opioid epidemic. I've shared this story publicly before. I have a brother who's in prison right now. And if you look all the way back, he had untreated mental health issues, largely well, I don't want to say largely, but in many ways because of the stigma attached to mental health issues, and ultimately because of lack of payment for treatment. He transitioned into addiction and then ultimately ended up in prison. So it's a pathway. But mental health issues are costing us so much money, not just in regards to opioids. Diabetes, I know, because I've looked at the numbers, is one of your number one costs. Are you going to be able to take your diabetes medications regularly if you're depressed? The answer is no. It feeds into so many different health factors and non-health factors, and I would encourage you to look at what you're paying for, again, in your benefit programs, and how you're screening for mental health issues in your workplaces. We've got to destigmatize mental health issues. We've got to help folks understand that treatment is available and will make them more productive, both in their own personal lives and as employees.
Thank you. Last thoughts?
Well, my last thoughts are we're only going to do this together. And as your Surgeon General, and I am your Surgeon General, I am committed to making the link between health and the economy, again, not because it matters to me, though it does, but because it matters to you. So help me help your companies achieve a healthier bottom line by ultimately looking at and doing something about the link between health and the economy.
Great. Dr. Adams, thank you very much.
Thank you all very much for your time.
Great. Thank you. Thanks again, Dr. Adams. And Dr. Adams mentioned the hurricanes. And we had a special request from the governor's office in Puerto Rico just to say a few words about what's going on there. And it's still a dire situation. Luis Davila, who's the deputy director of the governor's office of Puerto Rico here in Washington, D.C., he's here somewhere. I don't know if he's in the room right now. But his request was, please tell your companies that we still need help. And there's one way that you can help immediately, and this is a site that the First Lady of Puerto Rico, she is promoting, United for Puerto Rico. So you can donate through there, both money as well as volunteer services. Please help. And if you wanted to work with any of the nonprofits, which many of them have been here today, they're there too. Help them. The job is still not finished. So along those lines, we wanted to talk about other disasters. And we're so fortunate that we're joined today by Diane Melly, who's the Vice President of Global Citizenship Initiatives at IBM. IBM's been a long-term partner of the Chamber Foundation, and Diane and IBM are doing some really amazing things in all the disaster hotspots of the world. So please welcome Diane Melly.
Thank you, Mark. Running away from me. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. Not an easy topic to talk about. We really have seen a season of really unprecedented disasters in our country and in the Caribbean. So unprecedented disasters, but the silver lining is the response from the corporate community. Really incredible activity from many of the companies in the room. We have seen 6 major disasters, Category 3 hurricanes, just in this season alone, and it's not over yet. Major fatalities, 434 deaths across Harvey and Irma and Maria. So really a very costly season. As the Surgeon General just pointed out, you know, all of these things have an impact on the resiliency of our communities, and this disaster season has cost us $317 billion so far. But as I said, the corporate community is really responding. On the crisis tracker, I don't know if you're all aware of it, but one of the great things that Mark and his team do is support a corporate aid tracker on the CCC website. And over $365 million has been pledged in cash and in kind by over 400 companies involved in the CCC. So that is really, give yourselves a round of applause. That's an amazing contribution. Throughout the day today, we've heard a lot of people talking about the human aspect of things. And I think in these disasters, we really see our employees and citizens really stepping up to the challenge. To date, just in Hurricane Harvey alone, the National VOAD in Houston has logged over 1 million hours of volunteer time. Now, we're at the start of this. These disasters are going to be in recovery phase for a very long time. But it's very, very inspiring to see the work and the passion from our employees collectively and the kind of impacts that we can have. The Houston Volunteer Center, it's part of the Points of Light, they had over 103,000 individuals register on their portal to support the recovery work there. One of the growing trends that you'll see, that number is enormous, but it's really what is the impact that all these companies are having. And the trend really is towards, and you hear it throughout this day, so it's not unique to disasters, but it's very evident in companies' disaster responses that they're not just responding with cash, that they're really looking at their companies and their company's core competencies and really taking the best that that company has to offer and applying it to the preparedness, the response, and the recovery during these disasters. At IBM, we are a technology and innovation company. So we really are a leader in cognitive and cloud computing, data analytics, mobile technologies. So that really enables us to make meaningful contributions during these disasters and in preparation for disasters all over the world. And so we've been doing that at scale now for several years. We've responded to over 70 disasters just in recent years. Our response during this season has been $4.5 million of technology projects. I'd like to acknowledge my colleague, Rebecca Curzon, who's in the audience here in the front. She's leading these efforts. So from August till now to activate $4.5 million of projects, and I'll share with you what some of those innovations are in a moment. And again, I would be remiss to not mention how important our on-demand community, our global volunteerism effort is in engaging our employees around the world when the time is right for them to engage in these recovery activities. So another silver lining about these disasters is that what we're seeing, this was really the first set of disasters in the last 5 years that have really hit in the United States. We had not really been, we've been very fortunate as a country since Hurricane Sandy. And what it's enabled us to do is really be innovative with the incredible advancements of technology that has happened over the last recent years and what's emerging. Some of the things that we're doing that we think are exciting are leveraging artificial intelligence, leveraging cognitive agents for 211 systems. And I did see Russ Paulson earlier today, who runs the United Way 211 system worldwide. And so we are just absolutely thrilled. We began talking, during Harvey to say, how can technology help with the enormous call volumes that you're having? How can you serve more citizens more efficiently? And so we've embarked on building chatbots, cognitive agents, to help manage that call volume, to actually get 80% of those calls handled by a chatbot. And so we're implementing that work in Florida in response to Irma, and we will then spread that work throughout the United Way system around the world. You've all probably heard of blockchain technologies, very popular, very emerging technology that enables secure transactions between two parties. And so as you might imagine, in these disasters, there's a significant amount of revenue and funding that is flowing between parties. So we are designing blockchain solutions in the relief funds in Texas, also in the Mexico earthquakes. So again, another exciting opportunity to apply the latest technology and really tap into the passion of your employees. We have employees like banging on Rebecca and I's door saying, we want to engage, we want to engage. So like I said, the inspiration of this series of disasters has really been being able to reach out, engage business units in IBM that we had not really engaged in some of the developing market disasters that we've been responding to in recent years. We're also very excited about the new partnerships. We come together in conferences like this, we talk to each other. I love it because you don't really know, someone spoke to me earlier this afternoon and I'm like, books, give out books? Okay, well, let me think about that. And it's funny how at the time of these disasters, some of these things that are in the back of your mind come to the forefront. So we were really struggling with what we could do in Puerto Rico because as you can hear by the kinds of things that I'm talking about, we need electricity and we need infrastructure in order to bring the best of what we have to offer. But what we're planning to do in Puerto Rico, and we've begun the discussions, is and we did some of this during Hurricane Sandy, is to do assessments of the technology infrastructures throughout the 1,100 schools that are closed in Puerto Rico. And we're partnering with Bechtel. IBM has a lot to offer in the technology infrastructure space and in the opportunity to make recommendations for how to rebuild that. But there's not a better partnership that we can think of than to join with Bechtel, who's expert in resiliency of construction and engineering. So, again, a great opportunity to come together. And my favorite partnership, not because I'm at the Center of Citizenship's annual conference, but this is my favorite partnership. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Center for Citizenship, we're partnering on a number of layers during these disasters. So IBM, as I said, is a cloud company, so we are offering through the local chambers in the respective states the opportunity to have free access to the IBM cloud. We're offering small businesses in those affected areas as well, especially in the areas that are underserved by some of the other resources that are flowing in, the coastal regions in Texas, et cetera, offering them, the small and medium-sized businesses there, resiliency workshop in addition to access to the cloud and recovery of their systems. The other thing that we're doing, and some of you that come to this conference every year probably remember that Dr. Bodish and myself for the last couple of years have talked about these sentiment analysis grants that IBM has been doing with the Chamber. And the last couple of years, those have been focused on analyzing big data with IBM's cognitive and analytics tools to see what the value is of social media on and your communications around your CSR activities to your brand. And so those two studies are there from the last 2 years. And we said, well, this year, let's really focus, given this enormous amount of disaster that is happening and this incredibly powerful response from the business community, we're focusing the sentiment analysis this year on this disaster response. So that work is just beginning, and we'll hope to share with all the companies what impact the work that you're doing is having on your brand, specifically related to how you're responding to these disasters. So I'm hoping this is not a new reality, but sadly it may be. We're seeing more severe, more frequent disasters, and we're seeing more pressure on companies. But I think, again, the good thing is that we have the opportunity to come together. We see, I think, right back to Valerie, first thing this morning, I was inspired by her remarks about purpose and passion of our people. Our employees want to engage. We want to be able to leverage our capabilities, and we want to collaborate with each other. So opportunity forward for all of us to come together. It's sad that the cause is disaster, but it really is a tremendous opportunity to make a difference together. I put this picture on my chart, and it's of a young man, Eric Esty, who's one of the many volunteers at IBM, but I included him because I wanted to close my remarks really thinking about the human aspect of this, that this is really about disaster, and it really is about the sacrifice that people are making to help each other. And Eric was deployed immediately. He's a National Guard volunteer who's a system architect at IBM. He was deployed during Harvey initially. Very humble young man who was personally credited with saving 17 lives in his unit. And so just amazing personal sacrifice to sacrifice his own life to save others. And then he's only back at work for a half a day, and then he's deployed on Irma. So we have, all of us have these amazing stories to tell of individuals. And what I'm going to show you right now is a short video that the Chamber has put together that highlights the work of many of the companies in the room. So thank you, and I look forward to working opportunity forward with all of you as we spend the next 12, 18 months helping these various disasters to recover. Thank you.
When disasters strike, America stands strong. And business is part of the solution. We offer our people, our expertise, our resources, and our compassion. Together, we are a network of support. When our communities need it most. Proving our resilience, proving our commitment to those whose lives we touch every day. From preparing, responding, and recovering from disasters. We are in this together, and when the road ahead is long, every step counts.
So thanks again, Diane, and I think she ran away from me this time, right? No, we're just teasing with each other. So one of the great things about leading the Corporate Citizenship Center is I have the discretion to actually talk about a topic that I want to talk about, but I only get to do that once during a conference. And this next one is it. We're going to hear from a few speakers who have been involved in trying to stem the tide of fake news, and from those who have been a victim of it. So people may be wondering, what does fake news have to do with corporate citizenship? Well, our aim is not to look at this pressing issue from the lens of the president or other government officials or even the media, but rather how its propagation affects the public's trust in societal institutions, and in this case, business. In an age when the average American checks Facebook 13 times, are you all checking Facebook 13 times today, or at least Twitter, right? It's a direct transmission of news from online sources, and it's growing daily. And digital disruptions are increasingly impacting our way of doing business, and it's affecting our corporate citizenship initiatives as well. So we all know the internet can be a tool for mischief, or even worse, but it also can be a facilitation platform to be a force for good. So first we'll hear from experts on how companies are responding to digital disruptions and ways to stem its tide by both depriving the purveyors of fake news the resources necessary to spread, but also the opportunity forward for companies to engage the public in online education and demonstrate how corporate citizenship initiatives can help strengthen brand allegiance during a time of crisis. Then, we'll end the day with a presentation of how the internet can make it easier, and easier than ever, to connect people moved to act on behalf of causes they care about, and support organizations that can offer help to people. So, up next, fake news discussion, and we want this to be a little bit controversial. I think we've got the right people for it. There, I'm looking at Chris, and he's like, me? And I'm like, yeah, well, yes. So Chris Gephardt is the Chief Executive Officer of Store Strategy and Story, and he's with participants Leah Gertzner, Vice President of Public Affairs at American Express, and Jeff Jarvis, Director of the Toe Knight Center for Entrepreneurial Journalism at the City University of New York. Please join me in welcoming them.
Thanks. Well, we'll do our best to be controversial.
Yeah.
It is end of the day, right? And I was actually looking at the first page in the program, and I was going to say, it's really interesting that Mark has on there that businesses are problem solvers, first and foremost, right? The core of a business is solving some sort of a problem. And I've certainly been a big believer and have built a whole business around the idea of businesses solving problems that have real social importance and impact. And on his list where he talks about problems to be solved by businesses are water scarcity and the environment, and now us, fake news. And so I think that's really interesting because when you think about sort of the disasters of the day, you definitely can put fake news in that category. I'm joined by Leah Gerstner, who is a old friend of mine. We've done a lot of work together in the past. She is head of public affairs at American Express. Actually, the first time I came to U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, Leah, was for the project that we'd worked on, Spent, which was a 40-minute film that American Express had funded about financial inclusion and financial literacy, and played a little clip of it, and it really showed how a brand can fund content that's important and about a social issue and move the needle, and we did in a really significant way. Jeff Jarvis is joining us from the City University of New York. And so what we have here is two sides, right? We have an academic side who's really studying, we'll go with that, right? Maybe that's the controversial part, right? We have somebody who's studying media, is an expert in media, and has been looking at this issue for a long time and has actually created an institute around studying this particular issue. And then Leah comes from the brand side, which at the end of the day, media is primarily funded by all of us in this room, by brands, by the private sector. And it was John S. Knight that said, a solvent press is a free press, right? And you really can't have one without the other. But with that funding comes responsibility and opportunity as well. So I want to start with you, Jeff, to talk and frame this issue a little bit. You said when we were prepping for this that you actually hate the term fake news, which I think is really, really fascinating. Could you give us just a little bit about your background and what you're doing, and why do you hate that term so much?
I'm just a journalism professor. I started Entertainment Weekly. I worked on the Daily News in New York, so I'm an old journalist, and I've been teaching for 10 years at CUNY. The reason I hate fake news as a title is because it's been co-opted, and now things that are true are called fake. And what we're really talking about is misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. There's a lot of things we can call this. And I think that it affects the business world in a few ways. One is that sometimes businesses are victims of this. But also, as you just said, business, thank goodness, still supports media and journalism and also supports some of the miscreant actors here. So I'm proud to say I got $14 million from Craig Newmark of Craigslist, Facebook, the Ford Foundation and others, I'm independent of them, to start the News Integrity Initiative, where we're working on these issues around first manipulation, but also around trust. So I want to mention just one thing that we've done is start what we call the Open Brand Safety Initiative with Storiful, Moat, Trust Metrics, other companies those of you in the ad side would know. And we've identified at the first step the kind of lowest of the rotten hanging fruit of awful sites.
Do you want to give us an example?
I can't even, I don't want to give them any credit. But they're made up, junk sites. Right. Yet, and we haven't published this yet, but we know that one advertiser, for example, looking at 3 to 7% of their ads were going to this lowest awful set of sites. So there's a corporate responsibility in what we support. There's also a corporate risk in what you support. Witness what's happening right now with the Twitter accounts of Sleeping Giants and the hashtag grab your wallet. Just now, they've gone after Hannity because Hannity was supporting Judge Moore, and Keurig came out, I think, bravely and said, we're going to pull our ads. Then they got a little dicey about it, nervous, when Hannity fans started destroying their Keurig machines. Then the liberals made fun of them because you're destroying something you've already bought. Be that as it may, there's a corporate impact and a corporate responsibility in this arena. So the reason that I'm here, because I was at a ad council advisory meeting where they're going to start, I hope, a campaign in what is called news literacy. I don't like that term either, but it's going to be about responsible sharing. And I think that brands can have a big impact in how we try to support media in a better way.
Absolutely. Now, Leah, your side of this issue is oftentimes, you're like the fire department, right? You're 911. When something goes wrong publicly, you get the phone call, must be great, right? So how do you deal with that in this environment? And how often is American Express actually dealing with something where it's adjacent to something that maybe your customers don't like, or something that affects your brand?
Well, and not only am I the fire department, often my name or my colleagues' names are mentioned in tweets, and you know, call Leah Gerstner at this number and let her know how you feel about X, Y, or Z related to, you know, something that perhaps we sponsored or didn't actually sponsor but have been said to sponsor. You know, all sorts of mischief out there happening. So the way that we, you know, really think about it is first and foremost, we partner with the ad platforms, and we're doing our best there to have open dialogue and conversation about how do we ensure that our ads don't indirectly appear in places where they shouldn't be. But when we're on the receiving end of fake news or misinformation or whatever it may be, the first line of defense is really not to overreact. I think that that's sort of the intent sometimes with some brands. They immediately take a side or jump into the dialogue, and sometimes that's the worst thing you can do. You sort of have to take a step back and realize what's going on here, because what Jeff has shared is something that we're seeing more and more of, which is that people are not only creating misinformation, they're then buying likes. Likes are for sale, or dislikes are for sale. And they're creating an environment where there's this artificial engagement. And in many cases, you see an engineered movement kind of spike up, and it's unclear always how much of that is real, or how much of those are real customers coming to you with complaints, and how much of it is
It must be
really
hard to
engineered.
wait.
It
You
is.
see this roiling out there.
It
must be
does.
very hard.
It comes on sort of fast and furious. And for us, we've had maybe 2 or 3 occasions of this in the last year. So it's not like this is something we're dealing with every single day. But it can be certainly devastating for smaller brands. I think I was sharing with both of you, there was a story not too long ago where there was a woman who owned a business that manufactured wigs, and someone had impersonated her business and posted a retail ad on Walmart.com with a racial slur. And she was based in the UK, and overnight she got all of these terrible messages from her loyal customers saying, how could you, possibly do this? And unbeknownst to her, she didn't realize that someone else was impersonating her brand and that this had happened. And not only did she have to respond to all of the customers, and that was an overwhelming situation for her, she also obviously lost some revenue according to that. So this can be a big issue, especially for smaller businesses, I think, that are impacted by this, because one incident can be completely devastating.
Can run it off the rails.
Right.
Now, you must have an internal team, right, that is driving your social media, sending out offers, sending out new things. You have a ton of, American Express is famous for its ties into music, into, Broadway and shows and other things that it's constantly offering up, right? So you're very active in social media. How do you get your people to be sensitive to things that are popping up so that they know whether to, lean in or not? What do you do?
So we're always looking for early warning signs, and unfortunately, a lot of times they don't come early enough. But what we're looking for are just, there's a bit of a formula, I think, a lot of times to this, and usually the movements that are engineered, you can tell that there's multiple tweets that sort of look the same, or there's emails coming in that kind of look the same. And so, after going through this for a few times now, we've been able to spot that a bit more, and we kind of have a good sense of what's real and what's manufactured. And so and every case is really different, to be honest with you. Each one we have to step back and say, what's the upside? Do we respond? And if we respond, really, usually the best way to respond is to be as neutral as possible and to focus on setting the record straight with the facts, and not necessarily taking one side or another and further exacerbating whatever the issue may be that is being tweeted about or talked about in social media.
With the World Economic Forum, I'm working on setting up networks of newsrooms and brands and NGOs. Because I was at an event in San Francisco where I was surprised that most of these big brands have war rooms.
Yep.
But they don't seem to communicate much across each other. And so I think there's a need for you to share alerts and share best practices and just share headaches.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, in a few of the incidents that we've dealt with in the past, one was related to production of a theater, Shakespeare in the Park, production of Julius Caesar not that long ago, and we were not a sponsor of the production. However, we were called out as a sponsor. We had to go and work to correct that, but there were a number of other brands that were involved in that, and we did quickly reach out to them and you know, wanted to understand what were they going to say, how were they communicating about this, what were they thinking, and I do think it's important to make friends fast in those situations, because we can help each other, you know, make sure that we're correcting the misinformation out there, not one by one, but together. It's much more, I think, of a powerful way to disrupt the bad actors.
I think that's a really good point, and I know that specific example of that performance that you guys were not specifically associated with, but at the end of the day, it was a performance that got hijacked, basically.
Absolutely.
Right? You know, if you're the Tiki Torch people, do we have any Tiki Torch people here? Right? You went through something a couple of months ago that was, you know, a little bit crazy and completely unanticipated. If you're the Keurig folks, right, in San Francisco right now, you're like, what the hell happened, right? So can you just give us a little bit of, you know, the journalistic background on this? Like, how did we get here? How did it end up that, you know, these things are just like hair trigger right now, where there's probably been, you know, 3 emergencies since you've been sitting on the couch here, right? Like, how did we get to this place? Yeah, and hopefully not, but I mean, like, how did we end up in this place? And was it just inevitable because of social media and technology?
We've always had manipulation. We've always had fakery and lies going on. It may seem that the speed is greater. I think it's very important not to act too exceptional and think that this is also different today. It's also important not to get too panicky about what technology brings, because let's remember that technology brings incredible opportunities to connect each other, to do amazing things. When I hear people starting to get into a moral panic, which I think it's entering around this, I say, stop, look at your Facebook feed and tell me, just go through it for 10 minutes and tell me what is awful in there. You're not going to find it. It's not, the world is not falling down around our ears. Technology is bringing us some great and wonderful things, but there are bad actors. When you think about it, blogging, when I was an early blogger from 2001, it opened up this world where no longer did you have to be working for a newspaper as I did. You could now publish to the world. This was wonderful. It democratized the creation of content and communication. But then along come spammers, and then along come bad actors. Advertising, the same thing has happened. It got democratized thanks to Google and Facebook, so that your Aunt Mary can now sell her jam the world around, but then spammers came along, and then bad actors came along. So I think what we see, if you're interested in this, I recommend a couple of reports real quickly. Data and Society, which is a think tank in New York, did a great report on manipulation about 2-3 months ago. That's number one. Number two, I'll sound like I have a tinfoil hat on, but I also recommend the NATO Handbook on Russian Information Warfare.
Wow. Fantastic.
Because it is really illuminating.
We could have used that 12 months ago.
Yeah, well, we could have, because what they did in Ukraine, they then did here, and the bad guys all learned from each other. And then finally, there's a RAND report on the Russian information fire hose. These show you the techniques that are being used by manipulators, either for economic purposes or for political purposes. But you've got to stay ahead of this. You've got to recognize what's real and what's not. And it requires many new skill sets in a company.
So how did the Russians get so good at this?
Because they wanted to, because we're trusting, because they live in an authoritarian country, and our weakness is our strength. Our strength is that we have an open information system, but that means that it can be manipulated. And so what we have to do is change that. Now, Google, for example, has changed recently, real quickly. After the election, they called various people, including me, and said, what do you think? And they cared about relevance in search. So if you were, pardon my politics here, if you're dumb enough to ask the question, is climate change real? You're also dumb enough to click on these things, and they rise in search. And Google came to a very important decision in April, which is that they will now account for the reliability, authority, and quality of sources in search. So in that case of, is climate change real, and a third grader comes in and asks that for her homework, she's no longer going to have her mind poisoned, because now Google is siding with science. That's a big deal.
It is a huge deal. And I think that you're talking about that third grader, and this is exactly what we had talked about with Ad Council a few months ago, right? How do we train kids at the earliest ages to be more discerning in the way they consume content in this era, number one, and then number two for Leah, what role can brands play in actually helping that process?
I think we have a precondition that we need to get to first, which is civility. I think we see that the bad guys are trying to polarize us. It is working. We have to figure out how to make strangers less strange. So what I pushed at the Ad Council was not news literacy, which I think is a rather patronizing and paternalistic view of news. And if your product needs a user manual about how to use it, you've got problems. Instead, what I think is that we want to encourage responsible sharing. And that when you share something, now we're developing our norms around the internet. And when all of us at all ages, I've been bad too, when we share something that we think is just funny for the lulz, but we're sharing something that isn't right or that is a little mean or that doesn't really add to society, we've got to try to have a discussion around that kind of civility.
And I'll make two observations. I think, for one, once misinformation hits a brand, it's a bit too late. You have to be out there earning the trust of your customers way ahead of time, so that they have a reference point to understand what's true and what's not. The tendency, you would hope, is for your customers, the public, people, to disbelieve what is being said about you, but that isn't always the case. So you've got to continuously establish that relationship. I also think, as brands, there are things that we could actually learn from fake news, so to speak. I think not, and I'm not, to be clear, saying that we should be engaging in buying likes and doing all the things that the bad actors are doing. I am more or less saying we should be looking at, what does fake news look like, the style of it. Clearly it's found a very receptive audience, so what are the things that we can co-opt from that? The visuals, the video, the short text, the memes, and put that to use for good. I think there's a lot that we can be doing there, yes. and journalism too, and that's something that we're starting to explore. I think about all the amazing and inspiring work that all of you are doing around the conference, Allstate and the Purple Purses, the travel with purpose at Hilton, for us, Small Business Saturday and Shop Small, which is coming up. These are such great programs, and they really lend themselves to the style and format of fake news, and so we should be looking and doing more of that, and taking some good lessons, I think, from the bad actors out there.
Yeah, the way I put it in journalism is that we still insist that people come to our site and our product called news. Yep. We have to take journalism to the people where and when the conversation occurs. One of the conferences I love, besides now this one, is VidCon. The YouTube fans conference, because you see an entirely different relationship there of public to media. Right. And it's something we exactly have to learn. I think brands are way ahead of media in this, because we still are snotty enough to think that we're a destination. Right. You have to go, and you are dragged into the conversation, right. And you've learned how to do it.
So we just have a minute or so left. And I really, I'm excited that you're here and that you're part of this conversation. When Mark said that you were, besides getting the chance to see you again, I was excited because I think it's brands like American Express that actually can make a huge difference with your following and your community. You guys really are a media property, right? All brands are media properties, essentially. You're communicating, you're an editor, you're helping people. And do you see that you can eventually help people get to that level of discernment or understanding that in the future, the American Express cardholders of tomorrow, that you can see American Express helping them think through the information environment in some way? I think you can. I'm going to answer this for you. I think you can because you have the trust and respect
Thank you
of
for
your
the
consumers.
comments. I think there's a role for everyone to play, and I think that, again, as Jeff has made the point, as brands, we are putting content out there into the world and bringing people information, and I think for us, people trust us with their money. That's hugely important, and we can't lose that. And so for the things that are authentic and important to our business and to our brand, I think in those instances we can help. I don't think we can solve all the problems. Fake news is pervasive in so many different areas and industries, et cetera. But certainly in the areas that are core to our brand and what we stand for, I think we are working to make a difference.
That's great. And now, with 1 minute to go, how can a brand like American Express have an impact from your perspective and be part of your coalition that you're trying to build?
I think extending those areas where you do have to have people's trust and say, you trust us with our money, and when you have the opportunity to educate people about the facts involved, it's as simple as that. We are all part of an information ecosystem now. We in journalism don't own the truth. We never did. We don't own trust. We never did. We thought we did. But people also trust original sources of information. So for companies to be absolutely strident in being truthful and transparent and complete and gaining trust that way, then we improve the whole ecosystem.
We did some research a few years ago when I was at Participant Media. Leah, we've talked about this in the past, that a brand can actually be an even better validator of an action path than a big nonprofit. So people's relationships with brands, a brand like American Express, is really, really deep and meaningful and important, and it can really have a huge impact. So I'm excited that you're here and a part of this, because I think this is what it's going to need. It's going to be all hands on deck to push back against the fake news, sorry to use the term, that's out there today, and to basically put us in a better place in terms of how we use this digital connection. So thank you very much.
The F-word news. And you'll be
the F-word, yes, the F-word, exactly. So can we thank our panelists for being a part of the discussion. Thanks. And now we're going, so if fake news is the use of our digital connection for bad things, we are now going to end the day on something more positive, which is how our digital connection can be used in positive ways. So we've got an exciting new tool that has come online in the last year that we wanted to talk about and make sure you all were aware of.
The more we see, the more removed we feel. The more headlines we read, the more we wish there was something we could do. Introducing Action Button. Now you can impact the news you read, instantly donate to a cause, sign real petitions, or contact policymakers and support the issues you care about faster than ever before. All at the push of a button. Action Button. Change the headlines.
So let me bring up the founder and creator of Speakable, the parent company of the Action Button, Jordan Hewson.
This is what we're here.
Welcome. So I can't help but say I feel a bit like Mike Douglas up here with doing this multiple thing, but it's so great to have you here, and I think it's a great way to end the day, which is about how the internet is being used in positive ways. You have a great story about founding the company and the kind of epiphany that you had. Would you tell that story?
Yeah, absolutely, and firstly, thank you for having me. The genesis of Action Button really came from a personal experience that I had 5 years ago. In 2012, I was reading an article about Malala being shot by the Taliban for advocating for her own right to go to school. And I was so frustrated and angered by the content, but I never actually clicked on the link to sign a petition that was included in the article. And I was working as a campaigner on the end of extreme poverty at the time, so it was my job to try to answer these questions of how do we get people to take action. So catching myself in the act of not doing anything to support Malala really made me ask some questions about the barriers that exist to our own civic participation. You know, if we make it easier and faster for people to take action, will that increase the likelihood that they'll do it? And so that experience really prompted the work that I'm doing today with Action Button.
So that was the hypothesis, that if we could shorten the gap between some point of inspiration and some easy way, kind of low barrier way to get involved, people will do it. So talk about the product itself. So Speakable is the company that you started, and the first thing that you've rolled out is the Take Action button, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Action Button is our first product. It's a news tool that essentially connects newsreaders to opportunities to make a difference on content that inspires them. So that could be signing petitions, that could be donating. We poll people where they sit on certain issues. We quiz them on issues to help educate them. We'll also geolocate your representatives so you can seamlessly contact them on relevant content. And everything happens within the article experience. So our publisher partners are really excited about that. It's really about, you know, increasing the engagement that's happening on their sites and the community that's being built on those platforms.
So the problem we're solving is that gap, jumping over that gap, right?
Absolutely, and I think, you know, news has changed in the way that we engage with it. You know, it started with liking articles, then sharing articles, and we really see Action Button as the next evolution of what we can do with information. And it's been really, really exciting to see people's response to this product and proven there's a huge market demand. We have 71% completion on actions when they're initiated, which is really, really impressive and remarkable, and just speaks to, I guess, the demand that exists for this kind of engagement and participation in news stories, where it's not just a one-way street, it can actually be a two-way dialogue with readers.
So you've got to work with nonprofits on one side, presumably, right?
Yes.
On the action side. So you've got to have inventory of actions, right? And on the other side, you've got to have publishers, right? That are where those actions are going to flow through, right? Talk to us about the progress that you've made over the last year, because it's just been a year, right? You launched in last
we
fall.
launched in October last year
Okay.
with Vice, Huffington Post, and Guardian as our founding partners.
It's a good group.
It was exciting, absolutely, and they sort of led this shift in media that's happening. Essentially, we vet civic and charitable actions from credible nonprofits and put them into our database of actions, and then use an algorithm to match that to relevant
Is that a
news content.
huge number of nonprofits, or is it what's
Right now we're working with 100.
100,
so
okay, so that's
we're specifying and targeting which nonprofits we want to promote on these publishers.
And you curate those actions? You're looking at
Yeah,
them?
we work with them to help them design campaigns, which people can then support in moments.
And talk about the conversation with the publisher. So that's key, right?
Yes.
Sitting there talking with them. We were talking earlier about the challenge of that, because the publisher's first kind of reaction might be, look, I'm a journalist, right? I just tell the story. And what happens next is kind of up to them. That's sort of the old school model, right? Is that what you're finding?
Yeah, when I started having some of these conversations 5 years ago, I was essentially like laughed out of the room with like New York Times or HuffPost Impact. They were just like, this will never happen. There will never be this synergy between media and impact. It's just, it breaks journalistic neutrality and those principles. And I think once publishers started to understand that we're not changing how journalism is written, we're changing how journalism is consumed, they began to take this on and realize that's actually a very important distinction, and giving people the opportunity to find solutions to content that inspires them doesn't actually break any standards of their neutrality and doesn't change how they write their content. So that's been a really important breakthrough, and we've seen, a lot of media companies move forward in this new direction because they're also excited about increasing engagement on their content.
And they've got to, right? Because
Well, they've got
this
to
is how
build-
millennials
Right.
want to, this is how you want to engage with content, right?
Yes, me.
Right?
And this is why we're seeing Facebook and Twitter be the places where content and news is consumed, because you can build community and conversation, action on those platforms in a way that you can't do on HuffPost.com. So I think it's an exciting progression for them.
And what's the feedback from the publishers as you've been getting it out there now? What are they saying?
I think they're really excited to be able to maximize the impact of their content, but also be able to monitor and measure the impact of their content, because they can now use action as a KPI of performance. So whether or not someone took an action is kind of the highest level of performance I think you could expect from content. So I think they're very excited about that.
And we talked about the millennial shift that's happened as millennials have become the biggest target, right, for everybody in terms of either selling something or writing something or getting it out there. How are millennials different in terms of cause and of social impact?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, they really identify, 70% believe and would self-identify as an activist. So 50%, signed petitions last year, 84% donated. So those are really high numbers. And I think everyone is very excited by the level of civic activity we're seeing in our generation, particularly in this political moment. And I think there's a lot to be excited about because of that. But I also think there's a big opportunity for brands to get involved and include millennials. 83% believe businesses should be involved in social good. 79% wish it were easier to know what businesses are doing for purpose. And the most interesting statistic is that 69% actually want companies to provide consumers with ways that they can get involved in social good.
That's great.
And so this is something we're looking at as an opportunity for Action Button to pilot in 2018. We're getting 16 times click-through than traditional display ads. Wow. So we think there's a huge opportunity to include brands into the conversation, and it would help to increase their relevancy by being connected to trending media, news stories. An example, I'm going to throw Leah under the bus in this because American Express was just on the stage, but if American Express were to say, we're going to sponsor your Give technology and empower our consumers to decide where they want us to spend our corporate social dollars, and really empowering a consumer to make a difference when world events are happening in the moment and make that instantaneous and hyper relevant. So that's an exciting opportunity that we have.
I think that's a great example of how a brand could leverage the platform. Would those be, actions from American Express, or would they be potentially sponsoring actions from a nonprofit, or what are some of the ideas that you have about how a brand could actually jump into the system?
Yeah, I think either a brand could power their own CSR campaign through Action Button, or come on to sponsor one of the campaigns in our ecosystem. I think there's a lot of flexibility there, and it would be equally successful, to see either of that promoted in front of those audiences. So
you've also talked about how it lives beyond media and beyond digital, which I think could be another area that potentially brands could play in. So could you talk a little bit about that? Like, how do you take it out into the world beyond?
Yeah, I mean, we're very excited because the next product development that we have in the pipeline is activating video. So I'm excited to be able to see this empowering documentaries. We want to get on YouTube videos. We want this to be so ubiquitous that you're watching a documentary on Apple TV and you're able to take an action right there. So I think that's really exciting. And then also for brands or nonprofits to be able to capture audience supporters on their own websites. So aside from publishers' websites, they can actually use Action Button as a tool with their own audiences.
That's great. Well, you've got a room full of brands. How can they get involved with the Take Action Button?
Yes. I think if any brand is interested in the work that we're doing, I mean, I'm here to speak to you and would love to connect on it. So
That's great. I think there's a definite need for this. We've talked about some of the stuff that we did in the past at Participant that tried to do some of this. You've built a really elegant and beautiful, I think, product that can really work. And there's clearly a hunger for it. And so congratulations on getting it launched.
Thank you so much.
And for coming and talking about this and for actually finding a way to use the internet for good, which we really need right now, significantly. So thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks, Jordan. The internet for good. That sounds great, doesn't it? So today, we're done. We're done with the hard part today, but we do have a reception for everyone outside the main doors here. We hope that you'll stay. We hope that you'll network, and that we hope that you'll come back tomorrow. Breakfast at 8, speaking session starts at 9. Please don't be late. Thanks again, everyone.